Larian is continuously running high on their success of Baldur's Gate 3, one of the greatest games ever made. Even prior to Baldur's Gate 3, Larian is no stranger to producing high quality titles. Today's game is one such classic with Divinity Original Sin 2. Released in 2017, this served as the sequel to 2014's Original Sin with a reworked combat system and a much bigger budget to work with. Same as the first game, a definitive edition was released in 2018 that brought on many improvements and changes. While I still do like the first Original Sin, there are several issues with it that time has only helped to exacerbate. Original Sin 2, however, is a far more beloved and held to a higher regard. I tend to agree, so let's dive in as to why Original Sin 2 is a timeless classic. So when you start up the game, you have several options to choose from. For a majority of this review, we will be looking at the main campaign here. There are several difficulties to choose from, ranging from story mode all the way to honor mode. Honor mode is basically the hardest difficulty there is, with only being one save file, making it basically an Iron Man mode. Dying in honor mode means that the game is over and your save file gets deleted. Since I am not a masochist in any way, I will play this in classic mode, which is the game's normal difficulty. And from here, right off the bat, you'll notice a huge change within the character creator. Instead of having 2 blank slates, you now have the option to choose one of 6 origin characters or create your own. If you decide to create your own character, you have the choice from human, elf, dwarf, and lizard. You can even go with the undead variants to make them more interesting. All origin characters also have their own story you can listen to, performed with various theatrics.
For my unique red skin and unparalleled skills as a general of the House of War, I, the Red Prince, was raised within the vast palaces of the fabled Forbidden City. I was destined to become the next emperor. But my ambitions suffered a bit of a setback when I fell from grace for cavorting with demons.
I've done a complete playthrough of the Red Prince before, so I will instead choose a different origin character this time around. I will go with Lohse, who has a spirit within her that she is desperately trying to get rid of to no avail. Similar to Original Sin 1, you can customize the character in whatever way you want. For Lohse, I will go with the Shadowblade build, which specializes in Scoundrel and Polymorph skills. Her weapon of choice will be 2 daggers that she uses to backstab enemies with. I'll round the rest of the party once we get there to help complement her skills. And now let's begin the game properly. After the intro video, you wake up in some sort of ship called the Lady Vengeance. Instead of playing as source hunters from the first game, you are now the source hunted, as you are a sorcerer that can harness the power of source. You're being taken to Fort Joy one day to get cleansed, whatever in Lucian's divine grace that means. While you can go upstairs to proceed through the game as expected, the bottom floor can be used as a tutorial to explore and find out how the game works. If you're familiar with Original Sin 1 and Baldur's Gate 3, you'll feel right at home in terms of how the game is controlled. You move your characters in real time and delve in combat in a turn-based fashion. It's also where you can use your innate skills and see how they perform. Once you're done, you can go upstairs to the main deck of the ship and interact with the people there. Most of the Magisters will look down on you, considering that you are a sorcerer and a prisoner, although there are some friendly sorts. This is also where you'll meet the other origin characters, which can potentially become your companions. Even in the first introduction, you can already tell that your companions in this game are going to be much deeper and interesting than anything the first game could offer. Your time on the ship is ultimately cut short, however, as the Voidwoken end up attacking. This causes you to crash land on a beach, which has become the Larian staple. When you wake up, you'll realize that you've landed on the beach of Fort Joy, and this is where your destination was always going to be. How in Lucian's name you stayed alive when almost everyone else on the ship died is not important at the moment. What is important is to gather some equipment and begin getting a team going. The first companion we will recruit is the Red Prince, who is a pompous lizard who ended up conversing with demons and is now on a quest to get his kingdom back. Despite his arrogance, he will serve as a solid tank who also uses pyromancy to give him a bit of versatility. Vayne is the second choice, who is an ethereal from over 1,000 years ago. He will serve as the cleric that specializes in water, air, and necromancy. The last character took a bit of time to think about. I ultimately wanted a wayfarer on the team, but I was stuck in between 2 characters, and literally after sleeping on it, I decided to go with the natural choice in the coolest original character of the game, with mother flippin' Ifan Bezmed. He's a member of the Lone Wolves, a former soldier and a current mercenary for hire. Despite his background, he has a friendly demeanor and is a great fit for the team. He will specialize in huntsman and geomancy. And now that the party is set up, let's talk about what you'll be doing for the most part, and that is the combat. Similar to Original Sin 1, the combat is completely done in a turn-based manner. One of the first things you'll notice is that much of the combat has been streamlined compared to the first. Each character starts with 4 AP to use during their turn, and can have up to 6 AP at a time. This eliminates the whole speed concept as well as the whole cooldown and AP variance in the first game. It is much easier now to know how much HP each skill will take, along with how much AP you will be needed for you to travel. Same as the first game, you could perform a normal attack or use one of the many skills you'll eventually learn. Instead of spamming AoE attacks to inflict statuses on the enemy, you must first break their physical or magic armor. For example, Lohse deals physical damage with her daggers along with the many skills that she has. A favorite of mine is to get behind the enemy, then inflict ruptured tendons, combined with chicken claw to turn the enemy into a chicken. This, however, can only be done when the enemy's physical armor is at 0. The same applies to magic armor with statuses such as burning, stunned, and frozen. I personally enjoy it as knights are more susceptible to magical attacks, while magic users are more vulnerable to physical attacks. It also eliminates the ability spam the first game was known for. The synergy of the elements return and was one of the best elements of Original Sin. The same applies here with fire and oil, along with poison causing a huge explosion. You can also once again electrify the water and even blood to cause air damage to whomever is in that area. There's also a ton of new skills to play around with, although there are a few skills I wish that returned from the first game. Specifically, I do wish the all-powerful trip returned, as well as the ice wall. Both were moves I really enjoyed using. New to this game are source skills, which is a bit of a mixed bag for me. Since you are a sorcerer, you can gain source points to use in various skills that you learn or your own innate sword skill. Some of these, like chain lightning, are incredibly powerful and fun to use, while others feel surprisingly weak, like the meteor shower. You will first start out with only being able to hold 1 source point, but will eventually gain the ability to have 3 at a time. Some of the skills that use all 3 source points feel a bit lacking outside of a handful of them. Still, I do appreciate this inclusion and having an extra layer of strategy on when to use source skills. Height also now matters, giving the combat some much appreciated verticality. Archers can position themselves in high position and will get a damage bonus depending on the huntsman's skill level. This makes securing the high ground incredibly important, as even some spells can benefit from shooting from a vantage point. Heck, some battles can even come down to defending the high ground or even taking an enemy off of it. And as we all know, Divinity Original Sin is more than just combat. Similar to the first game, you'll also come across puzzles that you'll need to solve. I always enjoyed the puzzles in the Original Sin titles and in Baldur's Gate 3 for the many ways you can solve them. Some involve the use of skills, while others can be solved with straight up brute force. These are mostly fun, although there is the occasional puzzle that will serve as a head scratcher for some. And with all this combat and puzzling you'll do, you'll ultimately gain experience points that will lead to leveling up. Leveling up will provide attribute points to add, along with 1 point to add to a combat skill. I like this system as you can quickly specialize into a certain skill tree if you so desire. I'm able to spec out my character pretty easily from both a military and civil perspective. Crafting is back, and it is no longer tied to any specific skill level being required. If you know the recipe and have the ingredients, you can create whatever you'd like. It's much easier now to create grenades and arrows to use without having to force a character to have a level 3 in crafting or whatever. Skill crafting is also introduced, allowing you to combine 2 skill books to create unique skills. These are pretty cool to discover and use, so I recommend you to combine some spare books you find along the way. Presentation wise, we see a major step up in graphical fidelity. There is so much more detail on the character models and environments. Even the skills look far better when being performed and have some pretty cool animations when performing them. It helps that the oversaturated colors of the first game are gone and replaced with a richer and deeper color palette. The soundtrack was really something I had no idea what to expect. In my prior review of Original Sin 1, I poured my heart out for the OG Kirill Pokrovsky, as he was a huge part of the world of Rivellon. Every melody and note that he orchestrated and composed was a key part of what made Divinity so unique. At the time, I wasn't too familiar with Borislav Slavov and what he had to offer, but I was pleasantly surprised with what I've heard. Instead of going with the generic fantasy or just copying the style of the previous games, Borislav Slavov was masterfully able to capture the spirit of the prior Divinity titles while also adding his own unique flair. I normally don't call out specific songs and soundtracks, but listen to Amber Ale and you'll get exactly why this soundtrack kicks ass, or slaps like the new boy English kids like to say. So many instruments used and highlighted in this game that really help to elevate the overall experience. Add to the fact that you can select one of 4 instruments to influence to the current song for each character, and you have a very unique audio experience. Pro gamer tick, pick the cello for your instrument. And now let's talk about the major piece that may scare away some players, and that is the overall game length. If you fancy yourself a completionist, or at least someone who wants to beat every game in your collection at least once, you'll be in for a long ass road. While there are always ways to beat games quicker, be prepared to put anywhere from at least 60 hours to over 100 hours, depending on your skill level and how much content you want to explore. As much as I love both Original Sin 2 and Baldur's Gate 3, both are huge time sinks and can be challenging to find time depending on your lifestyle. Personally, I do appreciate the long length in such an amazing game, but I will admit that the final act felt like it was padding when the game was honestly already long enough. The crazy thing though is that's not all. Along with the main campaign is the arena mode, where you can battle against bots or some friends in battles. This mode uses the characters from the game that you'll meet along the way. While the mode and characters are ultimately unbalanced, I actually have quite a bit of fun duking it out with others. It's always fun playing around with the Divinity combat system in the various arenas that are provided. It's a shame though that this never really caught on with the fan base despite Larian's attempts to do so. It's probably why Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't have a PvP mode and probably never will despite the potential. What has somewhat caught on, however, is the Game Master mode. This allows you to create custom campaigns using the Divinity Original Sin 2 engine. This was actually one of the stretch goals for the game's Kickstarter. It ultimately designed to play in a group setting with a dungeon master in tow. If you have a dedicated group, I can see this being an incredibly fun time. The only thing, however, is the amount of time you'll need to dedicate building up your campaign. There's quite a bit of custom campaigns out there to download, so kudos to the community for that. And I think that about sums it up. It's pretty easy to tell with this review and title, but I easily recommend Original Sin 2. It improves upon everything that the original had to offer, with far more engaging combat, better companions, a better storyline, and overall improved production values. Yes, this game can be difficult at times and has some frustrating moments, but it is far less than in the original game. There's always a better approach to each and every encounter, and that's what keeps me coming back time and time again. It's just plain fun and incredibly stimulating to the brain. If you haven't yet, definitely do yourself a favor and try this game out. If you like RPGs of any kind, you'll easily enjoy this one. Thank you for watching as always, and this is Powerhouse, signing off.